Hi, I'm Stu Hodge, and like a lot of you, I have a little workshop in my garage. One of the challenges with a workshop in the garage, if you want to park a vehicle in here, is just the debris that you cause when you're working on any sort of a home project, whether it be a little woodworking project or in my case, maybe my electronics hobby. You end up with stuff on the floor. It could be screws, it could be nails, things that could damage a vehicle. So you want to keep clean. And one of the ways that I've approached that in the past is just with a broom and dustpan. Recently, I was at a thrift store and I picked up a little device. It's called a Perfect Sweep TURBO. It's by Bissell. I brought it home, stuck it on charge, and it worked great for about 3 minutes. It's obviously in need of some updating on the battery. I guess it must be pretty old or been used quite a lot. I've decided to go ahead and swap out the battery, and at the same time check out all the other features and just make sure everything's in good running order, and I thought you'd like to join along. Now it's a little bit unwieldy. There is a handle. It does come off, but as you can see, only the top part comes out. This leaves a small neck that's going to make this a little bit difficult, a little bit rocky when we try to disassemble it. So what we'll do is we'll find some way to brace this. It could be as simple as just a couple of blocks and underneath the housing to hold this part flat while we let the neck of the handle mount just kind of fall into the breeze. Again, we want to mount this on something that will allow us to keep this flat so that it'll make it stable. I have a couple of portable sawhorses, and that's what I'm going to use. Again, simple blocking and underneath the flat surfaces would probably work just as well. But since I have this, I'm going to go ahead and use it. Now this housing is plastic, so these screws are just self-tapping screws that tapped into a hole when they were first assembled. We don't have to be too careful taking them out, but when we put it back in, we want to try to get into that same thread pattern. But for now, just taking it apart, I'm going to go ahead and use a power drill. Now that we have all the screws loosened, now it's a matter of figuring out how this comes apart. Sometimes it can have little locking tabs on one side or the other. This doesn't seem to have too much holding it together. We still want to be a little careful that we don't lose any parts as we bring this opened up, sort of like that wheel. We want to try to keep everything together and in one place. I'm going to move this up to the bench, and we'll continue from there. Okay, so I brought it up onto the bench. There's the wheel that got away from us. Might as well just pull the other one away. See what's holding this, if anything. It could be just that the screws are still a little snug. No, it's coming right apart. So everything is loose. We've got to be a little careful with these screws. Make sure that they don't get away from us. I do have a little magnet that might help pull some of these out. Now the screws obviously are pretty important when putting it back together. I always keep a lot of little jars around. Gives me a great place to put stuff like this so that I don't lose the screws that I'm going to need when I get to reassemble this. Now obviously if there was multiple kinds of screws, you might want to use a little box, something, you know, with multiple compartments. But for this, all of these screws, they appear like they're going to be the same. So let's see if we can just get them all out and into the jar. Persuade it on out. Okay, so we've got all the screws out. Now you can see the inside of this. What we have here is just a pretty simple sweeper. It's got a little DC motor, a little beater bar that flips the dirt up into a catch basin for easy emptying, getting rid of the debris. This is the battery. This is what we think we're gonna need to replace. Simple connector, an on-off switch that comes through the foot pedal to turn this on and off. The charging port, a charging light. That looks like that might be a challenge to get back into place. An interlock switch. Now this interlock switch basically is in series with everything and won't allow the battery to be powered unless this switch is closed. And that happens when this bin is placed back into position. And I'll show you that in a little bit more detail in a little while. Again, just a simple belt. Now what I did notice when I was first playing with this was that there wasn't any real noise coming out of this motor. So I'm pretty sure we're not suffering from just a bad bearing or something like that that's putting a high load on the batteries and causing the fast discharge. I really believe that this is more related to just the lifetime of the battery. While we have this all open, I'm going to take some time to clean out any of the cracks and crevices where any dirt's gotten into. Make sure that everything is running freely. Unfortunately, what you'll find is that there's always going to get some debris and dirt up inside, hair, things like that, that you're just going to have to clean out once in a while. A thorough cleaning like this should not be necessary very often. On this motor, although it looks pretty complex, there's really not a lot of parts to this, and the bearings themselves may not be serviceable. In other words, they might not be something that we can lubricate. They could be nylon bearings or some sort of a plastic, and you definitely don't want to try a petroleum-based lubricant on those. We could end up breaking down that plastic. Or it could be a sealed bearing. In either case, we're not going to try to mess too much with that. We will listen to the motor and just make sure that everything is good and that there's no grinding sounds or no real big heavy load on that motor. So to go ahead and test the motor, what we're going to do is we're going to turn on the on-off switch, which is a push-button switch that clicks to an on position, and then we'll click back to an off position, and then we'll hit this interlock switch. Now you don't have to be too worried in here. All of this is low voltage, but the battery can contain quite a bit of energy, so you got to be a little careful about how you approach any of these exposed wires, and that you don't want something like a screwdriver or a wrench to get across that either. So we'll just try to fire up the motor. And actually you can hear it slowing down. It's running smooth, but that slowing down is basically that it doesn't have enough energy stored in this battery to keep it running for very long. I ran it for a couple of minutes before I started this video, so it just doesn't have a lifetime to it. So I did some research, looked online for what replacement battery would be used for this. And went to my standard source, which like everyone else is Amazon. I was able to find a battery with the same connector, the same rating, and the same make. So very simple. It's just going to be swapping out one battery and putting in this new one. So in the case of these batteries, both of them are rated at 1500 milliamp hours. Milliamp hour is basically just telling you how much energy is stored so that you're able to supply a certain amount of current to this motor for a certain period of time. And what that basically means is milli is a fraction of 1,000, so it's 1.5 amps for an hour. I can't imagine that that's what this motor is rated for, that higher current, but I'll check into that and let you know as well. But the battery will supply that much current for that length of time before it reaches its discharge point. So swapping out the battery is pretty straightforward. This connector is a locking type connector. There is a spring load clip on this side, the side that stays with the unit. We just squeeze that clip and we can pull that connector apart and remove the old battery. Putting the new battery in is just a matter of lining up the pins and plugging it together. you'll notice that one pin hole is square and the other one is round, and the pin casing on this side, one is square and one is round. So you can't mess this up. Just put it back together. Now this battery probably did not come pre-charged. We'll charge it, but for now let's just see if it does operate. And there you can hear the difference, just a much stronger drive on that motor. We will get this back together, but first I'm going to charge it a little bit so that we can see how it does when it's all open in its case as well. For cleaning, you can see that all the electronics can come out of the top section of the housing. And what we'll do is we'll just feed this neck back down through, and I'll just spend a little bit of time just cleaning up some of the different areas inside this housing. I'm not, again, looking for this to be pristine new condition, but while it's open I might as well get any dirt, just kind of clean it up, maybe hit it with a sanitizing wipe just to make sure that it's as good as it needs to be to function properly. So while I'm cleaning this, let me just give you a little bit of background. My wife and I, from time to time, will stop at thrift stores, just to kind of see what's around. I've been looking for something to clean up in the garage, and even the back deck. Cleaning up the dirt and debris that happens from when we're doing a little bit of gardening or repotting a plant. Something that is just very simple, straightforward. Not a vacuum or with something where you could get large pieces of dirt into an impeller. This is just a sweeper. It's an electronic version of what you do with a broom and a dustpan. So very easy to use, very uncomplicated, so we won't see very much potential for damage from when we're sweeping up even items like a screw or a nut. If you don't want to go through the process of finding a unit yourself at a flea market or thrift store, these units are not very expensive. This whole system brand new is only about $45. I like the feeling of taking something that somebody else no longer wanted and bringing it back to life, using it for the purpose it was intended, but also satisfying a need that I have without adding to the waste streams and actually saving something from the waste stream. So now cleaning out the roller, it's pretty gross, pulling out hair that, it did not belong with the device when it was new, and we have really not used it around here, so this is obviously somebody else's. But you just get through it, you get it out, and the operation will be better because of it. You'll get a cleaner sweep, but you'll also find that the unit will run smoother, not having that hair wrapped around this beater bar, stuck up in the roller area. So it's something that's worth doing. And again, a trusty disinfecting wipe goes a long way to making you feel a little bit better about touching all of this stuff. So there, clean and hair-free. So now that we've got this cleaned up a little bit, you can see a tab here. This tab, when this all mounts back together, this tab is what comes down and presses on that little interlock switch that I showed you earlier. So everything is cleaned. We'll start putting this back together, get it onto charge, because we don't want to run it without a full charge, and then see how long it lasts. The original specification on the sweeper was 60 minutes, so I'm hoping that we can get to 60 minutes, but even 45 is more than enough to clean a garage, maybe a back deck. So we're hopeful that that's all that it's going to take is just a battery change, and we'll get up in that 45 to 60 minutes worth of runtime. So let's start putting this back together. Should be pretty straightforward. We can see where the motor goes and how it sits into place, along with the beater bar and these end caps. Now these end caps are curved on one side, which shows up on this side here, which is the bottom part of the unit. So we'll make sure that those go in that direction, with the side with the gear on the same end as the motor. So we'll lift that end and stick this belt around the gear on the beater bar. The belt has teeth on it, just like a chain and sprocket system. So it's a firm drive to this beater bar. And then do the same with the motor. Just lift it out enough to be able to put the belt back on. And that's got everything in place there. The battery unit, there's a little question, just because of the way everything came apart, as to how this would sit. If I put it in like this, this connector would end up shrouding the push button, and that gets pushed from this side. So I look at this in a couple of different arrangements, but I think actually that this is the best arrangement. And this connector will just sit down along this edge. This LED that is the charging LED, to get this positioned back up in the top case is going to be the biggest challenge, I think. This little contact switch, this is the one that will enable the system when you put the dustbin in. Slides down into a little captured place over here. I'll show you that up close. You can see the little place that it goes into, and it literally just slides into place. Then when the cover comes in, it'll actually push that little switch with a pin that comes down through. So if we put the two halves close together and then look at this LED and where it will end up being, it's going to plug in through a hole in the case here. So this has to line up over here. So we need to pre-position this LED. It will be on the other side of this screw hole mate here. So this hole and this pin here will mate. So we want to get it to the other side, and it'll be positioned something like that. So we just need to rework the wiring a little bit, make sure that we've got enough of leeway to get it plugged in once we start assembling this. So here you can see everything positioned, how I've routed all of the wiring so that it's as clean and as out of the way as possible. These wires route down in along a channel here. The handle mount will actually mount into here through the top, and it's just held in place through friction. There is a little guide down in here that runs up against this bumper wheel, which is spring loaded, and that just holds it in a retent position of up when you bring it back. So there's really nothing that's a moving part in there that's too serious to have going on. So now again, getting this up through the hole in the top is going to be our challenge. So to finish the assembly, I'm going to take a small box, any kind of a little block will do, but put this base up onto a block. That gives some clearance for the wheels, which will hang down lower than the case. So we need a little bit of ground clearance as we put this together. We start the wheels into place. Then we're going to work on the handle piece. Now the handle could go in two different ways. And the ideal solution is to be able to see which way is the right way to begin with. But we can make some generalized assumptions as to what's right and what's wrong with how the handle will be oriented when it's in the case. And I'm pretty sure it goes in this way, so I'm going to put this in place. Then it's a matter of dropping the top cover down over the rest of it. and then just start aligning things. And you can see that there is a tab on the top plastic that gets in the way of the wheels. And so that takes just a little bit of adjustment to get that down into the right spot. And then the same on the other side, where you'll have to pull the wheel out of place to be able to get it into the right spot. And then, as you can see, we're pretty much lined up and ready to drop this together. Now we still have to deal with that one indicator LED, and it won't be easy. To get the LED in is pretty tricky. They could have had just a little bit more wire on here, which I could do, but it's really not something that's worth it for something like this. So I'm just gonna work with a pair of tweezers up in the dark in here and see what I can figure out. And I seem to have it in place. So now if I can just get this case to close, with that LED in place, I think we'll be all set. Obviously something on the front is shifted a little bit. I'll get in there again with the tweezers to straighten out that mount up in the front. That's letting the front close, and then it's just getting this back to be able to close into the space that it's cut here. And there we go. So now we'll button it back up with the screws and see how it does. To reassemble, we'll go back to the sawhorses to let that handle mount drop down in between them, gives us a stable workplace, and then we'll get our screws back in place. So now to take the screws out, I used a power drill with a #1 Phillips screwdriver bit. To put them back in, we're going to just a standard screwdriver. And the reason is, again, because this is plastic, we don't want to cross thread any of the holes that we can help. So we drop a screw in, and if we take this screwdriver and turn it in reverse with very light pressure, we can actually feel, there it is, when you cover over one of the threads, so backing out of that thread. And then when you go forward, it just goes right back down into the same threads that were there before. So we'll repeat this for all these locations, and there's a few of them. We have a total of 10 screws to put in, and then we'll put this on charge. Okay, now that we've got it all buttoned up, put back together, what we should do before we put it on charge is, I guess, just make sure that it still works. So again, because there is an interlock switch that lines up with a pin on this dustbin, we have to install the dustbin. Then when we press the switch, you can see that it runs. So I think we're good to go. Next thing is put it on charge. I'm going to leave it overnight to make sure that it gets a nice full charge, and then we'll see how it does tomorrow. We'll sweep some stuff. Okay, so we've let this charge overnight. You can see from the LED that it is fully charged. When the LED goes off, it's at full charge. So we're going to try sweeping some stuff, see how it does. So we'll start with just some paper shreds and see how it goes with something simple. Well, that was pretty easy. So on to some nuts and washers. Not bad. So screws ought to be the toughest thing that we see. Choose them right up pretty easily. thought I'd try some shelf pins because of their odd shape. It does a pretty good job of getting these up. So now the whole works mixed together. I ran the sweeper for about 45 minutes before attempting this, and it still has enough power to get right through everything. Overall, I'd say it did a great job, and it's back to at least new running condition. Pretty easy to empty out, and you can see everything was picked up. Okay, that's about it. As you saw, it was doing a pretty good job of picking up nuts and bolts and screws, pieces of paper, the normal kind of stuff that I'd see on my garage floor. I did it with ease, and I'm pretty happy with the results. The only step that's left now is I'm going to take the old battery, and I'm going to head to my local Walmart. They have a battery recycling center there. Make sure that I recycle this, again, not to add to the waste stream. I'm afraid that if somebody else had picked this up, had not had the intention of doing a refurbishment on it, you would have found this in a landfill somewhere. And so I'm pretty happy that we managed to save some plastic and electronics from ending up in the landfill. Total cost for this was well under $20. It was probably around $16. And it's going to do the job really nice. Please like this video and subscribe to my channel, and I'll continue showing you more projects from my home shop.